Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to today's feature presentation on understanding culture economy, how your 2020 values will make or break 2030 success. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator today. My goal today is to make today's webinar as interactive as possible. So we have gone ahead and added a few fun poll questions to the discussion today. Also, if you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, please use the webinar questions queue. Go ahead and get those questions in. We'll answer them as we go and towards the end. When it makes sense to jump in with questions, we'll go ahead and jump in and do so. But we do have a dedicated 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. But if you have any questions about Humantelligence, webinar questions, future webinar topics, feel free to reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com or just chat me on LinkedIn. To set the stage, Humantelligence is the leading culture analytics and recruiting for best fit solution. Our scalable SaaS platform accurately measures culture at the individual, team, and corporate level, and provides talent insights to optimize performance so you can be more intentional in recruiting for predictive success. Today's presentation is going to have some follow-up materials provided. So after the webinar, I'll go ahead and send out an email to all of our attendees today with the webinar recording, webinar PDF of slides. So they'll come in PDF form. I'll also send out a white paper that we conducted with HR.com to over 500 HR executives, a link to try the Humantelligence self-assessment on the next slide. And actually, you probably just saw it on my last slide. You can actually see some of my results and our presenters' results as well from that self-assessment. I'll also put that link in the chat box here when I'm done speaking here. Also, I'll send out a registration. We have another webinar series actually starting in January on driving a culture of performance, measure, manage, and hire for culture. So I'll make sure to send that out after the webinar, but I'll also put it in the chat box here after I'm done speaking. So without further ado, I want to present. We have two presenters today, and so the first one here is Juan Betancourt. So he's our CEO here at Humantelligence. He has extensive background in operations. He's worked for P&L and executive leadership. He's got he worked for Decathlon. He worked for Puma. He was the CMO and chief strategy officer, led Puma's relaunch. Worked at Siebel Systems, Procter & Gamble. He's got a lot of background in HR and talent acquisition and recruiting. He ran a successful executive search firm for 10 years, and has a Harvard background, Wharton background as well. So Juan is again our CEO, and you can see here some of his results. And so if you want to see some of your results today too, I will make sure to send that link out to everybody as well. Our second presenter today is Martin Lister. So he's a partner here at Humantelligence. Martin has over 25 years of commercial experience in the fields of defense, oil and gas, exploration and production, construction, technology, chemicals, engineering, mining, food production, just to name a few. Practical, culturally adaptable, flexible, and commercially pragmatic is his highly focused approach to problem solving, and appreciated by boards and senior management across 6 different continents. So, without further ado, I do want to just pass things off to Juan here, and Juan's going to go through our agenda for today. Then that'll lead us into our first series of poll questions.
Thanks, Charles. This is Juan Betancourt, CEO of Humantelligence. Feel free to ask any questions you have during my part of the presentation or my colleague Martin Lister's presentation in the chat group. And you can chat. I think you can spell out exactly to whom you're chatting, either just to Martin or to Charles Summers or to organizers, or you can let everybody in the chat group see your questions. And I think There's also, is there also a question section that's different than the chat group, Charles? I see there's two. Just want to make sure that you go to the right place.
Yep, the questions queue would be the place to put your questions.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so the agenda for today is understanding the culture economy concept and how this applies to a shifting workforce. Most of you are probably dealing with the challenge we all know as millennials. It's almost become a dirty word in HR, but it shouldn't be. It's actually the future, and it's a positive thing because they're going to be the future of success for you. So it should be seen as what can we do to engage them, to get them excited, and what resources and how do we engage them so that we as an organization, each of you should be thinking, can succeed and align our business model to that future workforce and their demands and their needs. And then the third part, we're going to end with culture trends worth following.
Yeah, and so I put a couple of poll questions in here to get us kicked off. So there's 3 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the first one here. And the first question, and Martin, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but the first question is, you know, a basic question. Do you think culture is important? Yes or no? And that's going to help lead into some additional questions here. And we'll spend about 5 more seconds on this one. Okay, so 100% of you think that culture is important. So I'm going to move on to the next one here. Do you know what your culture is worth? And that's another yes or no question.
And this is corporate organizational culture or team culture versus, generally speaking, your ethnic culture, you know, or what country you're from, just to be clear.
Give this about 30% of you voted. We'll give it another 10 seconds. We'll have a few votes coming in. Okay, so the results are in from that question. So 44% of you said yes, you do know what your culture is worth. 56% of you said no, you don't know what your culture is worth. All right, so one more question here. Do you have a budget dedicated to culture? And we'll give it about 30 seconds here. About 5 more seconds. Okay, so do you have a budget dedicated to culture? 36% of you said yes, 64% of you said no. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and hide those results, and Juan, I'll kick it back over to you here.
Could you read those results again on that first? And did you answer? Can you go through the results for all 3 questions, or we only did one?
Yeah. So, do you think culture is important? 100% said yes.
Okay.
For what is your culture worth? 44%, or do you know what your culture is worth? 44% said yes. And then for the last one, you have a budget dedicated to culture. 36% said yes, 64% said no.
Perfect.
Okay.
36% said yes on the budget dedicated?
Yes.
All right. So before I jump into this next slide, let's think about those results, right? Culture, is it important? 100%. Usually we get 93 to 95% for every 100 people we poll. This is a great crowd. Maybe we've hit a tipping point in the space. What's shocking is the last question. If 100% of you think that it's critical, mission critical, most important, I'm sure your CEOs agree with that. Only 36% of you, 1 in 3 of you, actually have a budget for it. There's a big gap. There's a huge delta in today what CEOs in companies believe is critical, i.e. the culture and their people, and a budget assigned to them. So if there's one takeaway, before we even get into the depth of what a culture economy is, you guys need to, you people, you HR executives, all of you need to go back and start to be an influencer and convince your management team to give you a budget to focus on the most important thing that 100% of you agree is so important, which is culture. And we are going to show you kind of the value of your culture as you go through this presentation, where half of you believe you think you know how important that culture is. Knowing your culture is the difference between a successful company, okay, and a failing company. Managing that culture, okay, is also the difference between a successful and failing company, and hiring for an intentional culture is the difference between a successful and failing company. Okay, we've become experts at Humantelligence in doing the hiring, the measuring, managing, and hiring, and we have lots of clients that we see who are in that paradigm shift of looking at culture with metrics and data. So with no further ado, I'll jump in again into the presentation. So what is this concept of the culture economy? The culture economy within a business or applied within an enterprise organization is the committed allocation of resources to employees' well-being and personal success that in turn enables them and promotes organizational success. What does that really mean? It is the budgets you apply to your people, and it's not just giving them more benefits. Benefits are important, giving them, healthcare, giving them, maybe mindfulness courses, supplemental education for them if they need it, development, personal development. Those are all important, but it's also in your learning and development teams and talent management teams, improving their career path and their career mobility so that they can have a career with you. Because most people today are not looking at just a job, they're looking at a career. And if you can start to manage your people for a career with your company and not just keeping them in a job, you'll probably be more successful. But that takes resources, it takes time, it takes knowledge, wisdom, and it takes looking at every person in a much more one-to-one fashion, not a set of 400 call center agents who are doing the same job, but literally John Smith or Mary Johnson, who are a call center agent and what's important to them. That's what the millennials will now seek and demand, and you need to align with that vision of an employee world and workforce, and those investments around that are your culture economy. Should I say next, Charles, on each slide, or do I have access to changing slides?
You don't have access, but I will. I'll press the button.
Okay. So as you know, the economies of countries, just like now companies, are defined by the way in which workers add value. The USA has a powerful economy because we have a really high productivity rate in our country of the workers in our country, okay, with lots of different culture attributes to our country, right? We have people from China, Brazil, Nigeria, you name it, Saudi Arabia. A lot of contributing individuals to this country lead to a flourishing economy. And so that knowledge, those analytical skills and true cultural alignment, because even though we all have different ways of being in our ethnic cultures, we all have come together in a, let's call it a US economy culture of being direct in our communication style, of being efficient in leveraging technology. These are all cultural attributes that you could argue are part of the US economy. The same way in your own company, you have culture traits, you have knowledge, analytical skills, and true cultural alignment across your sales, your marketing, your R&D, and procurement and supply chain divisions, so everything works in a highly functional way. This is what successful companies of the future will pursue. Next. What is the impact of a culture economy and not doing it well? Well, when the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM that we all lovingly call it, reported that turnover due to poor company culture combined with the revenue loss due to disengaged employees, that actually costs companies in the United States $415 billion each year. That's the cost of not looking at the economy culture for your company. Next. Unlike economies of the past, okay, and this is no longer economies of a country, but the economies of a company, the future of successful businesses lies in prioritizing people in order to grow productivity, engagement, and overall profits. Leadership should strive to create a model of harmony between human behaviors, values, and the goals of the business. Now don't change the screen, Charles, because I'm going to give an example. This alignment of the goals of the business with the culture of the company is not the management team putting a culture on the company entrance, having T-shirts and screensavers, and having everybody memorize a culture. This is much more bottom up, where you actually are hiring people that fit a culture, that's standardized, that you can actually measure. So one of the history lessons that I once heard from a really smart professor at Harvard, where I went to school, and then it was reinforced by some practical business case studies at Wharton Business School, is the following. 2,000 years of history, okay? You have the competitive advantage of companies, every company in the world, pre the year zero, when, AD and before D, Jesus Christ, after death and before death, okay? Competitive advantage in the year zero for all the societies in the world were assets. If you had the tulips, if you in Holland, if you had the sugar in Cuba, if you had the tea and the spices from India as England, okay, or the silk in China, you became the most powerful country or enterprise in the world. So it was all assets. That was a competitive advantage for 1,900 years. And then in the year 1900, 1890s, something happened. The world economy changed and its competitive advantage changed. And that was basically with the advent of the stock markets. Any good idea could raise capital on a capital exchange, and you were no longer capital constrained, and you could buy assets. You could buy all the steel or all the tulips you needed. Now it was more of a business model, a business practice that would lead to success. And so it was capital that led to, capital constraints were gone. And so then in the 1920s to 60s, what was the biggest competitive advantage? It wasn't assets, it wasn't capital, it was processes. So you had just-in-time process developed by the Japanese, and they started to kick the US's butt in manufacturing. And we had the best processes in the 1910s, 20s with Model T Ford, but they had better processes starting in Japan and then Germany. And then those car companies started to be much better, and that was a competitive advantage. And then what happened with technology in the 70s, 80s, and 90s? Technology automated processes. So a little history lesson, 2,000 years. Assets for about 1,900 years, and then capital, and then processes, all the way to 1990s. In the 1990s, it was technology. And what did technology do as a competitive advantage for your companies? It automated processes. It automated manufacturing processes, ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. It automated Siebel Systems, was the first CRM system, and then came Salesforce. It automated PeopleSoft, HR software, HRIS. But now all that competitive advantage around processes is done. All of you have all the software in the world at your companies to automate your back office, ERP, procurement, supply chain, your front office, CRM, sales, marketing, service, and now your HRIS and your applicant tracking systems. It's all been automated. There's no more competitive advantage. Where you, and this slide is most important, is understanding that it's your people, not automating them, but understanding them and optimizing them and keeping them happy. And it doesn't mean throwing benefits at them. It means understanding the right role for the right person in the right point of their career. Next. Okay, finding from our white paper. We did a white paper with HR.com. Well, they did it. We paid them to do it. Across 580 HR executives like you, the higher performing culture organizations were proven to be more likely to assess not through gut feel, but through assessments, individual and team cognitive preferences and working styles compared to the lower performing counterparts. Next. High performers at high performing companies are 3 times more likely to assess employees' ways of thinking, 4 times more likely to use assessments to learn cognitive styles to help teams function better, not just an assessment for self-awareness, but for team understanding, and nearly 3 times as likely to assess an employee's work behavior styles. Next. In short, successful human-centric companies of today in the next 20 years conduct more assessments and have access to a wider range of metrics and data analytics, call that talent insights, to learn and grow from. Next. Why does building your own internal culture economy matter? Next. Because of a shifting workforce. What worked for your last 20 years is not the same. I'm 50 years old. What worked for me to manage and motivate me when I worked at Procter & Gamble, at Decathlon, at Russell Reynolds, Heidrick & Struggles, Spencer Stewart, all these companies, is very different than what a millennial is motivated by. Millennials are now the largest generation in the workforce, and they're more demanding more than employment than they want more than employment. They want more than a job. They want an experience. Next. By 2020, millennials will comprise half of the total workforce. And by 2030, it's going to be 3/4 of the total workforce. Next. 88% of millennials expect the values of the organization to match their own values. So if you don't know what the values are of your organization, and even for your own team, if you have 20,000 people at your company, the values for all the teams across the company are very different. In Miami, in Boston office versus Lagos, Nigeria office versus London office versus Chengdu office in China. You're going to have very different culture behaviors. To remember this, think BMW. Culture being defined as behaviors, motivators, and work styles. The values piece is the motivators of BMW. Values are very different throughout your organization. So you need to know those, so how you hire people with the same values, that leads to long-term engagement in your organization. Next. Organizations have to be prepared to recruit this growing population of millennials and address what they value, which is stronger cultures and true culture alignment. So just finding someone on LinkedIn isn't going to give you culture alignment. And attempting to keep a culture defined by a prior generation will dramatically limit your candidate pool because values will not match. And worse, you could take the best person from your competitor and they could fail at your company. Happens all the time. Why? Because success is only 30% skills and experience and what you find on the resume, and 70% success is predicted by culture fit. Next. On average, millennials will be willing to give up about $7,600 in salary for a company that can provide a better work environment than their current work environment, something that aligns to what they like. Do they like a systematic environment or a creative environment? That's really important to people. Next. This generation of millennials clearly values being understood to the extent of taking a pay cut just to feel valued. This is where Humantelligence can help. We build that bridge between intangible needs and business success. Next. Humantelligence gives businesses the tools to address millennial values. First, to measure them, then to show those values to those millennials in data, not just through words. And then those values fall directly in line with the future trends that Fortune 100 has noted creating lasting business success. You too will then have a lasting business with people who stay longer than your competitors. Next. The culture must-haves that we have found with millennials are social responsibility and purpose, diversity and fairness, work-life balance, and career development. Next. I'm going to transition now to Martin Lister, who's going to talk about the emerging dominant generational traits among these millennials and others.
Thanks, Juan. Good evening, everybody, because I'm in the UK. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast in the US. Now, I want to move on and take these macro concepts that Juan has talked about and look at how they are filtering through into specific companies and industries and what effects we in HT are seeing across our research and clients. But before I do that, I want you to bear in mind that Gen Y and their following, Gen Y are the millennials, and Gen Z, which is the generation sort of entering the workforce now, who were born between 1995 and 2010, they are the most studied generation ever. Yeah, they are also the most educated generation ever. And as Juan mentioned, they value the quality of their experience and expect technology to be embraced and used to solve problems. Living with the problem or ignoring it is not an option for this generation. Yeah, they believe that large-scale problems can be solved. They really do challenge the world. Yeah, but they're not a selfish generation. Yeah, but fitting in and enjoying the experience is what matters to them. Yeah, and of course, because of their technology skills, they have the skills that are in demand in the workforce. Now, of course, the question is, can we see the changes as we transition from the Gen X, which is the generation that myself and Juan are in, to the millennials, the Gen Y, and can we measure that difference? Can we see how much that difference really is? So this is a study of over 1,000 professionals in Colombia. Yeah, it includes people from companies such as 3M, Unilever, PepsiCo, BBVA, which is a bank, a complete cross-section of the white-collar workforce. What I really like here is the grouping. You'll see there's a 10-year gap between the two, the left-hand chart and the right-hand chart. Yeah, so that puts us right into the heart of the sample differences and takes out the transition periods, where the late Gen Xers mix with the early millennials. Yeah, they're so-called Zennials, Zennials with an X. As you can see, the things that millennials value are very different to the things that Gen Xers value. Notice how freedom has increased with the millennials, as has knowledge and wealth. Whilst helping and supporting have drastically reduced on the left-hand side. So what we have measured describes what researchers are saying are the changes between the generations. But you are probably asking, how does all this affect me and my company? Next one, Charles. Well, let's take a look at some real data. Yeah, this is a law firm we recently worked with, and this is the senior team at that firm. Yeah. This firm is high helping, high service, high order, which is essentially rules, yeah, and they have a desire to belong, yeah. Does that sound like a lawyer? It definitely sounds like a lawyer to me, yeah. The two highest scoring traits are the ones in blue. The other traits that actually exist within the distribution are in grey. Noting that they are more practical, just go back one if you don't mind. So noting they are more practical than knowledge, yeah, which means they're not about the deep solution. Going further, to get something really good, that is completely missing. Yeah, and you'll remember that was in the millennial traits in a strong form. Yep. So here's the thing about this particular firm. Yeah, they're struggling to retain their young talent and recruit new graduates. Yeah, they're getting fewer and fewer applicants. Yeah, it's affecting their ability to get work done, and their fees are going down year on year. This company is heading towards a crisis. They do understand that they have a problem. Next one, Charles. So why? Well, because their values are aligned better with the Gen Xers, yeah, and are now well out of whack with the millennials. Yeah, so if this firm doesn't change to adapt to the cultural economy around them, yeah, the future does not look rosy to them. Where is their solution going to come from? Yeah, they have nothing to leverage with the talent pool. Yeah, when remember the message from 88% of the millennials. Yet no value alignment, no happy employee. So there's a direct impact on this organization. Yeah, so now let's take a look at an industry group that is doing well. This next one, there we go. Yeah, so, and that industry group is technology. Yeah, in particular, this particular data that we have is from the tech startup field. Yeah, it's an industry which is much better aligned to the millennial value set. Yeah, massive risk involved, but lots of people willing to get involved. Yeah. Does this kind of profile look like someone who works in tech, in a tech startup? Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, high knowledge base required, perfect for the millennial. Yeah, high freedom in that particular industry group, great. And although the wealth trait in the form of financial security isn't present, yeah, that is unique to the industry group where working on the problem is more important when we did the study. Yeah, in terms of tech, it's better, yeah, and that's why in tech, so the fit is better, and that's why in tech the problems are different. Often the cultural problems in tech are more behavioral. They have to tackle and set behavioral standards. They've got maybe a little too much of the freedom piece, if you like, where people feel totally free. They set their own behavioral standards. For example, you look at Uber, that wasn't really a cultural problem across the whole of Uber. That was where the CEO had a behavioral problem. Okay, so that's kind of a quick run through of some of the industry groups that we see, where we can see these traits from the millennials coming through loud and clear. So this one, I'm just going to hand back to Juan now.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. For some reason, I can't see. Can you make that? Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I couldn't see my screen. So in comparing the Fortune 100 best companies, okay, to the, let's call them non-winning contender companies, so the companies that are losing in the marketplace, it was found that the more consistent and inclusive an organization culture is, the more diverse it is demographically, and the more likely it is to outperform peers in the revenue growth. Next. In fact, companies in the top quartile, top 25% on these metrics enjoy 3 times the revenue growth of companies in the bottom 25%, meaning that a culture of fairness and equality boosts overall business potential. And when I say equality and diversity, I don't mean ethnicity, okay? That's good to have too, or as well. But what you want is diversity of thought. When I went to Harvard, I was a little rich Hispanic guy, Cuban. I had lots of friends who were African American, and they were from the wealthy families. We had Asian friends who were wealthy, and we had white friends who were wealthy. It wasn't very diverse, even though we had blacks, Asian, whites, and everything in between. Okay, diversity, okay, is not about racial and ethnic components only. It's important, but diversity of thought is where you're going to have the highest value add in terms of diversity, okay? And so you have to make that distinction. You need to look at both and not just hire everybody from the same background, even if they have different skin color. Next. Professional development. Professional development is paramount in engaging employees, okay? Only 29% of millennials feel engaged in their job. Most people are hiring employees for a job. So how many of you written a job description in the last year? And when you wrote that job description, did you write everything about that job? And did you go further? Did you write what success looks like 3 years out? Did you write what the next job is for that person? Are you guys putting in your job descriptions what N+1 job is going to look like, what the career track looks like for that person? Probably not, right? I was a recruiter. One of the things that made me stand above the rest of all other recruiters, okay, for executives and regular level roles, was I actually would recruit for people not for a job, but for a career at a company. And the HR organizations and some of the hiring managers would tell me, why are you putting in the next steps? We want to hire them just for this job. And I would tell them, because that's what millennials and that's what people want. They don't want just a job for 2 years. They want a home. They want a career. So think about that. That's really important. Next. Limiting advancement opportunities and development limits the potential of your workforce and the potential of your business as a whole. I was able to work at a retailer called Decathlon, in French pronounced Decathlon. They're 5 times bigger than Nike, even more profitable than Nike. So they're crushing Nike all over the world. You guys have never heard of them because they're not in the US, but they're $140 billion and Nike's only, I think, 20 billion. So it doesn't matter they're not in the US, but I work with them across Europe, Latin America, and Asia. And they're a retailer that sells sporting goods, okay? And they have over 200,000 SKUs. They have stores bigger than Walmart, okay? And what was fascinating when I worked with them, this is a retailer with 250,000 employees. I wish we had a poll question, because I'd ask the poll question, guess what the average time is with that retailer? Anybody on this call who comes from retail, usually it's about a 2-year, 3-year max, even for the best retailers. Decathlon had a 17-year average employment for 250,000 employees. How the hell did they do that? You know how they did it? This slide. Career mobility. Everyone who worked in stores, starting bottom up, stuffing shelves, to a department manager, to a store manager, to a regional manager, when they got to the highest point there, they could go to the corporate and work in product development. They make all their products. They have 30 brands. And then in product development, they could go into supply chain. They could have a lifetime career. And because Decathlon was able to manage that process, Decathlon is actually the largest, most successful retailer in the world. It's a perfect example of this slide. If you can get people to be happy and engaged across their lifetime at your company, you will keep them, and your company will end up being the best performing company, not just in your region, not just in your country, not just in your vertical or industry, but one of the most highly performing companies in the world, bar none. Next.
Hey, Juan, I have a question that fits in perfectly here right now. So I have a question that says, is it possible to map an hourly employee into a future role? I think it aligns well with this slide. Can you talk through that real quick?
Yeah, so once you understand the hourly employee, which is going to be less likely around intelligence and where they've worked and how many years experience, it's going to be all BMW. It's all going to be what is their behaviors. Are they decisive or are they deliberate? Are they change-oriented behaviors or are they really stable type people, right? What are their motivators, right? Are they innovative type people who are unique with unique perspectives, or are they more motivated by being part of a team and belonging? Are they more innovative and want money, or are they more service-oriented, right? And then work styles. Do they like kind of new solutions and change and new, no routine and things are different every day, or more and variety, or they like work environments that are stable, where they have facts and cautious and everything's controlled. Okay, that individual, once you know the BMW, the behaviors, motivators, work styles, and there are tools out there like Humantelligence and others that measure that quickly and cheaply. Once you know that, you can then map that in your organization and say, of our 2,000 roles at our retailer or at our manufacturing company or at our electronics distributor or whatever your company is, you already know all the roles. You've already mapped with a tool like this what profile works in that role. You can then, after a year or two in a role, that hourly worker, you can say, hey, for your next step in your career, your next N+1, these are 3 other roles in the organization, across the organization, where you might fit in and be happy. And let's talk about that. So that conversation now can be led with data, and it's not the blind leading the blind, where the company just forces people to what they think is good for the person, and where the person just says, hey, well, I want to do this job, when they have actually no clue if that job's good for them. So this is a data-driven way of achieving career mobility internally and moving people around to achieve what Decathlon was able to achieve 7, 10, 12 years with your organization, where somebody holds 5 jobs over 15 years. Thanks, Charles. Next.
Perfect. Yeah, and there was one more question that came in that I think is relevant. How do you profile a role?
So you profile a role the following way. You don't guess in your own subjective bias what you think it is, you use data. So you give an assessment to, let's say, 1,000 people in that role, let's say the register people, cashier people at a Walmart, or let's say the associates at a Best Buy, or 2,000 people in a manufacturing plant, whatever the role, whatever the level, doesn't matter. If you have more than 100 people in a role, you give the same test to everybody, and the test, kind of like the movie Moneyball, will pull out and show you the profile, the data that says of these 28 characteristics, these 3 things in motivators, these 2 in behaviors, and this 1 in work styles, or maybe 2, 2 and 1, or whatever the combination, when seen as together, anybody with a number 80 over 100 in these 4 or 5 things, they're going to succeed, because that's what already succeeds in your company. And then that's how you kind of create an ideal profile, leveraging your existing workforce and what already works. Or if you're going to change your concept or change your business model, you then can create one for your new concept, your new business model, based on the requirements you think. Now, this is not based on data because you don't have any, but if you're going to change your business model, like let's say a Best Buy sales associate, for 20 years, they had to be very deliberate, sit with you, know everything about the products, and kind of spend an hour with you in the store. Well, guess what? Come to the internet, now customers coming into Best Buy, they don't want the deliberate knowledge-based associate who's going to sit there for an hour with you. They want the person coming in to buy the product has already done research, knows the product they want, and just wants speed, decisive, get me out of the store. So they want to walk in and have someone who knows nothing about the product, just show them the shelf space where it is, hand them the product, and walk out. So a very different profile. Best Buy can use a product like this and say, okay, well, we have a new concept, a new need in the store. Let's create that new profile. So you can do it either way.
Perfect. We have some more questions coming in, but I'm gonna, just for time purposes, I'm gonna move along here, and then we can circle back with you after the webinar, or at the end of the webinar if we have time. Thanks.
By the way, Charles, how many total slides do I know if I should skip or go fast?
50. So we've got 15 more.
Okay, so I'm gonna go quickly. And Martin, which page am I passing the baton to you?
Perfectly on schedule. This one's mine. Yeah.
Perfect. and I introduce you, Martin Lister, again.
Okay, so, if you just go back to the case of the law firm, their misalignment, could be terminal in their case, but they have accepted that they do need to change and are using our results to focus that change. Hopefully that this is early enough, and hopefully they will accept the changes that they need to make and are now looking at. Yeah. But there are many examples of organizations that had the wrong culture or the cultural economy around them. And ultimately that leads to poor decision making because the context is all wrong. Think of BlackBerry, for example. Think of Blockbuster Video. Think of Kodak. All leaders in their field. Yeah. So but who now basically don't exist. Yeah. I mean, okay, I'll accept that BlackBerry still exists, but it's a shadow of its former self. And the lesson from companies like those 3 is that you have to change with the environment around you. Otherwise it could lead to your demise. Next one, Charles. Yeah, so, the penny is starting to drop that we need to engage on a people level more. Yeah, certainly the marketing people seem to be starting to get it, and they are often the first people to spot the changes in cultural trends. Yeah, they're at the front end of sales. They're at the front end of brand value. Yeah, but more and more people are embracing the people side of things. Here we see, Chevron, energy company, been around a long time. Cisco, much more tech oriented. When a tech company is starting to talk about human network, and when oil drillers are starting to talk about human energy, then you've got to start and think, really, there is a change coming here. Thanks, Charles. Historically, as Juan mentioned, performance problems were based around processes. Those of us who are old enough all remember process re-engineering as very much a thing. You know, if it wasn't a process that you're re-engineering, it was a product problem. You know, it wasn't really centered around the people and how they work and how they interact with each other to actually form a culture. Yeah, but the thinking has really moved on quite substantially. Next one, Charles. Yeah, so now the focus is much more on that untapped people opportunity. Yeah, the thing that I really like about this quote from Peter Drucker is that there is no mention of two words that we all know and love in relation to humans. The first is there is no mention of the word resources. Yeah, and secondly, there's no mention of the word capital. Yeah, why? Because I think that both of those words invoke a feeling of people as a commodity. Yeah, but what Peter Drucker is getting at here is the individuality of the people. Yeah, their uniqueness. Yeah, he expressly says it. Yeah, and it's embracing those individual characteristics, bringing them together into compatible teams, and then allowing that talent to show through. That will reap the rewards and the dividends from the workforce of the next 10 years. Thanks, Charles. Now, this is interesting, yeah, because we can relate this back to the poll that you all did, yeah. You know, what we can see from this particular slide is there's still an awful lot of progress to be made in the area of culture. Yeah, leaders do really value their culture. Yeah, 68%, it's a competitive advantage. You know, when a leader says it's a competitive advantage, it's a very serious thing. Yeah, but they don't actually know how to tackle it. Yeah. They don't really know what their culture is worth, although 44% of the audience here do, so you could be a step ahead of your own leaders. Yeah, and most of them can't even articulate their team cultures or their company cultures. Yeah, so, you know, that gap where you've only got, you know, 10% knowing how to build a culture and most people not even being able to articulate the culture, that is the opportunity. Thanks, Charles. Now, get your culture right and aligned with your talent, and then lots of things start to go right. Yeah, problems become less of an issue. You know, for example, you know, in terms of turnover, when we worked on cultural alignment, we recently worked with a large organization in the manufacturing sector, so that's back to the hourly paid area that the question was asked, and we reduced their turnover by 40%. Yeah. In the restaurant and hospitality field, we're seeing 60% turnover reductions when culture is tackled. Yeah, and the upside for those organizations, as well as turnover reduction, has been tremendous. You know, more repeat diners, better reviews, bigger check size for the restaurants, better productivity, reduced downtime on production lines for the manufacturer. You know, many millions of dollars of benefits have accrued. Next one, Charles. Now, you can't talk about the cultural economy without talking about engagement. Yeah. And I think it's not a stretch to say that employee engagement is in crisis in the West. You know, the average engagement across all countries is around 15%, according to Gallup. In the US, it's high, it's around 30% engagement. Yeah, across in Germany, despite its workers' councils and its protection of employment rights, it's the average of 15%. But I'm ashamed to say here in the UK, we are one of the lowest at only 8% of employees being engaged. You know, and it really does explain our productivity figures across the economy. You know, but bear in mind, one person's crisis is another person's advantage if you can embrace it. So next one, Charles. So we can, you know, there are so many statistics that I'm sure a lot of you have seen around engagement. What does culture cost? You know, it costs higher absenteeism, lower productivity, lower profitability. You can throw dollars at it. You know, the conclusion from all of this is that the problem is huge. You know, this directly relates back to the $415 billion of lost value that Juan mentioned in one of the first slides. So next one. Yeah, and you know, leaders admit it. You know, they say that we have a problem. Yeah, but they're not really moving the needle with the existing solutions. You know, we've got to start thinking differently about how we tackle this. You know, and that's what we're dedicated to in HT. So back to you, Juan.
Perfect. So what is the answer to boosting engagement and building a better culture, i.e. understanding your culture economy? Next. So it starts with understanding your people. We suggest shifting your focus to measuring what motivates them to deepen your understanding of their needs. This is not, by the way, an engagement survey. Engagement surveys actually don't improve engagement. It doesn't tell you if you have the right people in the right jobs and if they're going to stay. And an engagement survey, no one has ever used an engagement survey for hiring. Isn't that interesting? If all of you are trying to hire for culture fit, right? You've never used an engagement survey. The reason is an engagement survey doesn't help you hire for culture fit. An engagement survey is not your culture. Culture does not change every week, every month. So all your pulse surveys you're doing, okay, not part of your culture. Now, I don't want to talk badly about engagement surveys completely. They are good to know who's happy, who's not, why they're happy, why they're not. But it's not the DNA of your people. It's not going to tell you, do you have the right people aligned to the vision of the company? What we do, enter Humantelligence culture software. What we do is we target the cultural trends, okay, of the next 10 years, including building fairness into the workplace by eliminating recruiter bias, increase employee development through understanding life and career goals and internal motivators. It gives you a deeper sense of purpose, the idea that this company gets me and that they care. Next. Once employees' internal needs are met, performance skyrockets. I actually have a statistic here that I was researching while Martin was speaking that shows Korn Ferry, I just got this morning, literally hot off the press by Korn Ferry. I used to be a partner there. Okay, they're finding in their report in December of this year, called the report, the Korn Ferry report, you can Google this, the truth about strategy execution. I quote, businesses that align culture to strategy and engage and enable their people to deliver, those businesses see a 117% greater ROI, return on their investments, than those that don't. Okay, the future competitive advantage, back to that history lesson of 2,000 years of what leads to competitive advantage, is truly people and culture. It's been lip service for 50 years. We've all talked about it ad nauseum. Oh, we have one culture. Look at our culture guide. Look what we put on the wall and our company t-shirts, right? Yeah, that's great, except that's not your actual culture. It's what you want to be. Today, if you don't align culture to purpose, culture to mission, culture to goals and strategy, if you don't have a culture roadmap for every team in your organization and a culture roadmap for every division, every line of business, you will fail in 5 years achieving your goals as a company. Next. So, Humantelligence evaluates these 4 things. Culturally, the most important are 3 of the 4 that start with the letters BMW. Bottom left, orange. B, behaviors. How do you tend to behave in a given situation? The typical ways that you go about your work. So, you know, tools such as DISC, Pymetrics, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, Predictive Index, all of those fit in the bucket of the yellow, behaviors. And they're cheap and they're pretty quick. But they're not effective alone, because just knowing behaviors isn't enough. You need to understand what motivates somebody, the why they do their work, hidden motivators under the iceberg. That you have tools like Hogan, Lominger, but they cost a lot of money. You need a consultant. They're impossible to understand. You need a PhD. You have to say the dirty word. Are you certified to understand it? Give me a break. That's crazy. We give it to anybody who can read English 13 years and above, and we do it in 5 minutes, not in 45 minutes, right? And we price it where everybody gets access to this gift of self-awareness. And then W, BMW, behaviors, motivators, work styles. The W stands for your ideal work environment. What do you like to do, and what are the characteristics of the work environment that gives you the most energy and fulfillment? Okay, no engagement survey will ever tell you that and give you that. This tool will give you that. Okay, and so we measure BMW in 12 minutes. Okay, nobody else can measure that in less than an hour, and it is EEOC compliant, so you can use it for recruiting. And if God forbid you were ever sued, you would never lose in a court case because it has been technically validated and it does pass all the adverse impact and it's not discriminatory in any way. Next.
Yeah, and just jumping in real quick. So I did put the link to take that free self-assessment in the chat box too. So you should be able to click on that link and go take it for yourself.
Yeah, take it. And again, we give that for free because the assessment's not the value. The value is when your company can roll up the data and look at teams and pull out your high performers, low performers, where you can use the insights to recruit better for one role. We don't charge for the assessment. All those companies, DISC, Predictive Index, Pymetrics, everyone who charges you for a one and done test, they don't get it. That's self-awareness. We take it from self-awareness to emotional intelligence. Okay, where the organization understands everybody and everybody understands each other this way, that way, all across in any way. The old, your grandfather's assessments, that's just about self-awareness. That's not going to help your company. Company benefits. Because of lack of time, we'll be sending, Charles, we'll send out this presentation, right?
Yeah, I'll send out the recording and the actual the slide deck itself.
So
and if anybody has questions, there's a bunch of questions in here. We'll reach out to you personally, and we'll get your questions answered.
Yeah, and Carl, if anybody wants to stay on with their questions, I can stay on a little bit, so we can also do that. We can also do that. So in terms of, just quickly, for your current workforce, it guarantees better engagement between every two people. Imagine every email you write or every calendar invite you open, for every call or meeting you're gonna be on, you click on someone's name and it pops up their business personas. It pops up how to communicate, how to motivate, how to influence. So guaranteed better engagement, guaranteed. Every two people will understand, connect, and communicate better on any device across 6 languages, 125 countries, and integrated through all of your existing platforms. HRIS systems, SuccessFactors, Workday, ADP, Bamboo, ATS systems like iCIMS, Taleo, Greenhouse, and others. You'll be able to get team cultures. You'll be able to optimize performance. You'll get insights to lead to operational, improved profitability in every division. HR will now be a business performance function. Think about that. You'll be able to go toe-to-toe with the CFO and BI, business intelligence, and be able to point out how to make every division, every group, every function more profitable. For recruiting, it's a great candidate experience. It's reducing the time of all the interviews by 80%. Get rid of all your phone screens. Get rid of all your initial interviews. Don't pay for expensive video interviews that are only going to give you behaviors. Get a lot more information in a shorter time without spending the time going through all that. Okay, and be more accurate with no bias. Okay, get rid of 90% of subjectivity and hire for a culture of intention, whether it's to complement existing culture or to clone it. Whatever you want to do, we don't tell you what's right. You can figure out what you need, and you can then reduce turnover. Go see if HireVue guarantees a reduction of turnover in your company. I don't think it does. Neither does Pymetrics, neither does DISC. We will guarantee a reduction in turnover in any company we work with. Next. For the candidates, amazing experience. Whether they get hired, they're going to be happier and stay there longer, or if they don't get hired, for the 90% you reject, they'll get a gift of self-awareness. It's a seamless integration. They can take it to your existing platforms, okay, improved communication, and it's a lower candidate dropout rate. And it's also integrated to Google and Outlook so that all employees can use and see these insights 24/7. Next.
Perfect. So that actually that brings us to the questions portion of the webinar here. So I do understand if you all need to jump off, I'll look through our list of attendees who stay on here, and if you had a question, Juan and I can stay on for a few minutes here, and we can get your
I'll stay on and see Martin if Martin can stay on as well. Perfect.
And then so I just want to say thank you to those of you who were on here today with us, all of the attendees. After this webinar here in the next couple of hours, I'll put together the recording and all the materials that I mentioned that I would package up and send out. So look for an email from me, from my email address. I again really appreciate everybody jumping on. We have a webinar next month, so I hope to see you all again next month. Thank you. Okay, so Juan, let's see here. Let me see who's still on.
59 people, so I guess they want to hear some questions. Let's go with it. Let's do this, guys. Thanks for listening. Wednesday afternoon in December, in the cold.
Okay, so going back to that same thread of messages earlier on about how do you profile a role. Same person had a question about, let me just make this box a little bit bigger so I can see what it says. If you give it to everyone, you're not profiling success in a role, but all types of performance. How does that work?
So you do give it to everyone, but you then pull out the people that you have identified as an organization as high performers, mid performers, and low performers. Whatever grading system you guys have, some people use a 5-numbered system. You basically break it out into those different groups. You can do it for low-level front of the workforce up to leaders. So if you're a store or restaurant, retail, hospitality, look at all your store unit or franchise unit leaders and pull out your top performing ones, whether it's based on revenue or who you just identified as hypo. And so the tool will break out once you have mapped out the individuals. The tool will then just aggregate the data when you've pulled out the different people into those 2 different data sets, and it'll show you the differences and call out of 28 characteristics. Hey, these 5 are what explain the difference between high, mid, and low performers, or these 3, or these certain combinations. Next.
Okay, so the next question is, what words would let's see, let me make sure that I'm reading this right. What words would a dairy farm owner use to describe her farm's culture? So I think maybe referring to, the behaviors, motivators, and ideal work environment.
So I've done a lot of these. I have never heard a question about dairy farm. I love that. Getting a curveball in front of 50 people is awesome. So for instance, the culture of, and this is for a dairy farmer, the culture of a dairy farmer, let's say the dairy farm is a small dairy farm, family owned, and they have 20 cows and they're milking 20 cows just for them in their small neighborhood and local market. Okay, there, in terms of behaviors, they can be deliberate versus decisive. That's a behavioral trait that's more stability oriented. They can be cautious because they don't have many cows. They can't lose milk and they probably can't have much shrinkage in the system. So they're probably gonna have to be more cautious and strive for quality and repeatable process. In terms of motivators, they're not working on large teams. So it's probably an individual cow milker and individuals. So they can be more, in terms of motivators, more innovative and independent or self-reliant, more practical, problem solving on their own, and probably maybe unique perspectives and do things differently one day from the next. Again, a small dairy farmer. And ideal work styles of BMW, and I'm doing this on the fly, so I'm just giving you examples of how a tool like this can be used. They could be more creative, right? One day the cows aren't doing something they want or in the right time, so they're creative. They do a new solution versus a proven method. They're more flexible with minimal routine or controls. That is an example of a culture profile for BMW, right? Change-oriented, decisive, free-form, innovative, self-reliant, unique. And I'm only pulling out 4 or 5 or 6 things across BMW, and then work styles, new solutions, flexibility, variety. Now, let's move to a dairy farmer who's working with 10,000 cows. It's the biggest on the West Coast. It's the brand we all buy at the store when we buy milk. And they have a whole manufacturing process. There, you're going to want behaviors that are more cautious and deliberate, right? Because you make one mistake or change the process at all or do something different, you can lose millions of gallons of milk. In terms of motivators, you want extremely practical people and people who are belonging in service, because you probably have a ton of people working the farm, working the land, and you need to work in teams and be really helping in service and belonging with each other, and it's less lone rangers doing things on their own small farm. And lastly, work environment, you need a systematic environment. You need people who believe and follow proven methods, reliable procedures, very different than the new solutions guy or woman cow farmer over in the creative small farm. You need people to have predictability and structure and define quality standards, so that if there's a bacteria that gets in the system, it doesn't taint and destroy all the milk. Huge, bigger cost structure if something goes wrong. So that's a great example of a dairy farmer, small farm, same job versus in a big manufacturing process of a larger dairy farm. Next.
Okay, I want diversity of thought, but my high performers seem to have very similar values. How can I find diversity of thought in my candidates and ensure success?
Great question. So the statistical number, not mine, but all the research shows Amy Christoph Brown is the researcher who basically, you can search her on Google, prove this. 94% of leaders hire themselves. if I could share a screen, I would show you my team 6 years ago before I built the software. 90% of my own team were just like me, and that was not my intention. I was a professional partner. I'm the youngest partner in Heidrick & Struggles and the top billing partner under 45 at Korn Ferry. And here I was thinking I was a great recruiter. Are you kidding? I sucked. I ended up hiring for my software company everyone in my own likeness, people with the same behaviors, motivators, and work styles. This is a great question. It applies to everybody. Okay, how do you prevent that? You go to your leaders and show them the data. Because when I saw my data, I'm a data-driven guy. Most leaders are. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So the first step is measurement. You can't just tell them, hey, you keep hiring people like yourself. That qualitative argument, HR or talent acquisition, telling the P&L and the stores and the people out in the lines of business, you're hiring wrong, conceptually, you'll never win that battle. I did that for years. With data, you'll start to win that battle. When you show them a picture of their team and the data shows that 98% of the employees under them are exactly like them, then they're going to say, And so half of them will be convinced with that. The other half are then going to say, well, yes, of course, I'm doing great. I want to hire me because I'm awesome. I'm the leader. I want lots of leaders. There it's a little more tricky, but there you start to get other groups where you can show a team that's a peer to that leader and show different teams that might have a diverse team. And then you say, look at the performance of our top performing stores or our top performing teams, and look how diverse the group of people are under them. And the tool like ours shows that diversity index. It'll score at 0 to 100 on diversity of the team. And then it could show that their diversity is really low in terms of diversity of thought. And then with that kind of data, showing the ranking of teams or groups or retail stores by performance and which ones are diverse and which ones aren't, that's the piece that will then convince those leaders who want to keep hiring themselves that they should change. And it's just through data, and it's only through tools like this that you'll have that data. Next.
Perfect. If an organization is changing its business model to start providing organizational culture consulting services, how can HT help build out this service offering?
Repeat that question. The phone broke.
Yeah, Javier is asking if an organization is changing its business model to start providing organizational culture consulting services, how can HT help them build out this service offering?
Perfect. So we do partnership program. We have about 50 partners. We are talking to PwC, Deloitte, BCG, so the big ones. That's like 3 of our big partners. We're also talking to SuccessFactors, iCIMS, Taleo, Smart Recruiters, and a couple others. Barring those big brands I just mentioned, we have 40 different companies that are 2 to 1 individual HR consultant or coach to 20 consultants. And so we enable you with new products and services to go to your clients and start to help them with coaching one-to-one for leadership, for identifying team culture for your leadership clients, as well as organizational culture for all the projects you do with culture transformation and change management. Today, all the culture management and culture transformation, change management has been based on surveys of executives. Hey, what do you think you are? What do you think what's wrong? That's crazy. That's not data-driven. That's a total subjective qualitative, and that's why culture transformation hasn't worked very well, because you can't go from point A to B if you don't know what point A is. And point A is not asking your executives to pick from a list what they think they want to be. It's a bottom-up, data-driven, this is the reality of your culture. We did that with Honda. Honda thought their culture was creative and innovative. They spent years paying millions of dollars to consulting firms that basically all the executives agreed what they were. They had great engagement scores on their engagement surveys. 95% of employees were engaged, and everybody thought things were great. We're a creative, innovative culture at Honda. Guess what? Their products were like this in the marketplace, going down, 2 or 3 percentage points a year. We went to them and said, screw your engagement surveys, screw the surveys McKinsey, these big companies come in and do. Okay, we will measure culture, and it turned out only 12% of Honda North America was creative and innovative. And then we went in with a partner consulting firm that then built a transformation plan for them over 3 years, and their products started going up again. And guess what? The market feedback was, the issue was they did not have creative, innovative products. You don't have creative, innovative products because you didn't have creative, innovative people. And no engagement survey and no writing on the wall or t-shirts or screensavers is going to make your company creative, innovative. So we do work with partners. Reach out to me or Charles or anybody at my company. You can find us on the website, and we'll get you in touch with our head of partnership program. It doesn't cost you anything. We only share in the revenue, a certain percent split for any deals you end up closing, selling the product, or you can just pay us a managed service fee to use our technology for all your clients. Either one, this is a pie big enough for everyone. So everyone, companies, our clients, our partners, and all the employees at the companies, everyone benefits. Everyone becomes self-aware. All companies become emotionally intelligent. It's a win-win-win. Turnover goes down. Millennials don't change jobs every year. This is great for the economy. It's great for human beings. This is what we're trying to deliver. Meaning and purpose for everyone on the job forever. Happiness at work. This is what Humantelligence delivers. Next.
What seminar, course, diplomato do you recommend? We're a new startup in high growth. 2 years ago, we were four employees. We're now 35. We're going to grow to 50 in the next year and stabilize.
You should literally write to my company, me or Charles or anybody, and say, hey, I'm the guy who asked the question about the slow growth. My platform saved my own company. Okay, 4 years ago, we were 17 people. I ended up having to hire a whole new team because the culture for a startup, innovative, creative, throw spaghetti at the wall. When we finally figured out what worked 3 years ago, we had the wrong team and the wrong culture to scale. We didn't have process, we didn't have procedures, it wasn't systematic. So our platform is great for startups that are doing high growth because you can set what the next culture is for the next phase. CEOs all over the world complain when they say, are asked, why did you fail as a startup? A lot of the CEOs have said in the past, oh, because I didn't keep my culture. I wasn't able to interview everybody. Here's the reality, the wake-up moment for every young CEO out there or old of a startup. Your culture should change from 0 to 100,000 or maybe $1 million in revenue. From $1 million in revenue to 10 million, you're going to have a different culture. From 10 to 100 million, from 100 million to $1 billion, and $1 billion to 2 billion. I've actually been at companies that have grown all the way through that cycle. Culture changes every year, every couple of years for every company, every division, every group, and every single team. Every year that you do a strategy session in November, October, November, December, and kick off with new objectives, goals, strategies, every year you change as an organization, as a team. Every matrix company goes through that process. Well, guess what? Your culture should also change with it. A tool like ours helps you measure that culture, manage it, have a roadmap, and have that culture of intention as you manage it and hire for the future. Next.
Perfect. So that's actually our last question. I do see a couple of questions just on will you get the presentation, things like that. So yeah, I will send that out here in a couple of hours. But yeah, that's actually it. So I really appreciate it that everybody was able to come out today and join us on today's presentation. And we'll definitely look forward to seeing you all next month, and I'll get you a link to register for that next webinar.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you also to Janelle. Janelle put all this together. She's the brains behind my company and this webinar. So kudos to you, Janelle. Great job. Thanks, Martin, as the guest speaker, all the way from London, staying up late. And thanks to all of you 33 who are still on this call out of the 100 that started for making it through the entire call. Blessings to you in this time of Thanksgiving and to all your families.
Thank you.